1310, 95.1 FM, and its management. Attorney Nathaniel Lee, a lawyer with credibility, success, and experience, representing people in hundreds of jury trials, Nathaniel Lee is who you want by your side in the courtroom. You've seen the rest, now hire the best. Contact Lee, Cosell, and Feigley today. And now, to address the legal concerns of the community, Praise AM 1310, 95.1 FM presents Legally Speaking. Here are today's hosts.
Good morning, everyone. This is Nathaniel Lee. I'd like to thank each and every one of you for joining our show each week. We got outstanding guests again and contributors. We have Milton Grime, Vanita Banks, and Marlon Primes. But we got such a packed agenda today. We're going to get started right away. But before I get started, I'd like to give a big shout out to Pastor Moore. This week, we had a historic summit where the Black Ministers Alliance hosted the state religious leaders to deal with an urgent issue in our state. That is the unprovoked attack on affirmative action and diversity and inclusive DEI in our state by a governor. And we hope and pray that this group continue to meet and we could fight back and come up with some alternative solution to an urgent issue in our state. Having said that, it was like legal whiplash or something this week. It was so many things that have been going on, and I can't track all of them. So maybe we'll start with Attorney Banks. Attorney Banks, which of these stories? There's so many this week, I don't know where to start.
I understand, Attorney Lee, in roughly 60 days, we've seen approximately 73 executive orders. And from what I've read, an estimated 1/3 of Project 2025 has been implemented through executive order. And you will recall that Project 2025 is a 900-page manifesto. It's a playbook, a transition plan, also referred to as Agenda 47, which as one of its initial fundamental premises is to create a unitary presidency or president where all power is vested in the office of the president. We've seen attempts over the last 60 days to actually, we've seen illegal actions over the last 60 days, including attacks on just our basic fundamental tenets of democracy, 3 branches of government, checks and balances. We've seen actions that are illegal because, for example, funding is appropriated by Congress. And we've seen lots of executive orders which have just been outright illegal. So to your point, Attorney Lee, it is really hard to keep up with them. What I do is when I see some of these things, for example, the attack on the executive order addressing or purporting to end birthright citizenship. I know that violates the 14th Amendment. And so there is a case filed regarding that issue. And so I'm looking to the courts in many of these cases to address these illegal actions that have been occurring over the last 60 days.
Now, Milton
Yes.
and Marlon, what I noticed, Attorney Banks was talking about accident, but one of the most traumatic things I saw also was the helplessness of all these federal workers. They were protesting in your city, Milton, and all over the country Uh, I mean, this is crazy stuff. So all these federal folks, they get to work one day, they're locked out of their computer, they walked out the building with no advance notice. Gee,
And
it hardly seemed fair.
my experience and involvement with working for the last 50 years as a lawyer is that unemployment insurance does not take the place of a check, of an employment check. And it's greatly less than what you are used to earning and paying your bills with. And if they are even eligible for unemployment insurance, I don't think it's going to be an amount of money equal to what they were making. So it's going to be a lot of displaced and and people who are not able to pay their bills. The Department of Government Efficiency, it was almost like looking at that list of topics to discuss today that your office provided us with. And when I got to the last one, I said, "Whew, we're not going to be able to cover all of that in one Saturday." And that seems to be what they're doing with us now. They're throwing out what we're planning, a reduction. We're planning on changing a 250-year institution. I'm not saying that the Pony Express or the post office is the idyllic way of delivering mail, but just as an aside, I don't know if you saw six triple eight about the Women Corps and its service who delivered 9 million letters within less than 6 months. But we have a system of mail that's been used for hundreds of years. And they're talking about wiping that out, privatizing it, and changing the whole setup that we're used to. So it's like they're laughing at us, Nathaniel, because we can't keep up, is what the point I'm trying to make. It's like DOGGY is an acronym that you and Nate and Vanita and I sit back on the side and laugh at. Don't nobody else out there know what we're doing. Let's DOGGY them today. It's almost comical what they're doing, but it's not comical because of so many people being affected. So
That's sad. Well, Marlon, here's a problem. As a former U.S. attorney, first, what are the rights, how much money they get? And you got to be mad as hell now. You spent your legal career representing the United States of America. I mean, this got to be devastating. I mean, what's going on with the U.S. attorneys?
Yeah, it's really devastating, Nathaniel. It's really good to be with you and Milton and Vanita this morning. These are individuals that they love their country. They're trying to do the right thing. They can make a lot more money in the private sector, and they've been some sacrifice. And then you have to go through a very detailed process to get those jobs in the U.S. Attorney's Office, including a credit check, an FBI background check. And then you're in the door and you're doing your work, and then arbitrarily you're just walked out. So it's really unseemly and really inappropriate in my view. Now, they're typically 1 year probationary status for many of the employees. And so, and in some cases, there's a 2-year probation, which is an extension of the application process. And it makes it easier for, the federal government to remove you. But one of the things you have to be able to demonstrate that there, is some type of impropriety or misconduct or not doing their job. And so, I think what's going to perhaps happen is that you're going to see a number of lawsuits.
Milton's frozen.
he froze at lawsuits, but while he's frozen,
And in unemployment, the maximum you can get is $400. And if you're in one of these large cities, that's not going to, pay any of your bills. That's not going to pay your mortgage, your car.
I want to confirm with Marlon that that's $400 a week. It's $1,600 a month.
Wow. Well, Marlon, you froze up. Can you hear us okay, Marlon?
Yeah, I can hear you okay now.
You cut off. You were saying it's $400 a week for
400. Yeah, 400. It's based on a sliding scale, just like you have your Social Security. It's calculated in terms of, how much you put into the system over your work life. And based upon the amount of money that you were making, they will make a determination that this is the maximum that you can get. It's the same formula as it relates to unemployment compensation. They'll look at how much you were making, and the maximum that you can make is 400 hours a week. And so the problem is that, if you're living in a large city and you're a young employee, you haven't had a chance to pay down that mortgage or that car payment. I mean, that's going to be devastating to try to make that payment. You're going to risk, being homeless, not being able to feed your family. So it's really unseemly.
Employees, I understand, received an email entitled "Fork in the Road." How offensive, and made to pack up, their belongings and, escorted out of their uh, offices. I understand that employees, these are human beings, were crying because they were being treated, as criminals, as Musk we saw parading around last week on a stage with a chainsaw. um, Employees locked out of computer systems, with 20-year-olds having access to confidential proprietary government computer systems. Musk setting up private database servers, creating a huge cybersecurity threat. All these actions are just disastrous for our government employees, 2.3 million that have no promise of benefits. The government, as you know, is only funded through March 14th. So it's a devastating situation. And I have a fundamental question as to whether or not this Doge office, this alleged Department of Government Efficiency, and we've seen that it possesses no efficiency. We've seen or heard of no plan for this reduction in force. And I wonder whether this so-called Doge department is even legal. What do you think, colleagues?
I think it's doggy, and it just seems like Musk is literally laughing at our society, at our public, when he's talking about enacting some of these new policies and decisions, y'all. It's scary. It's scary what could happen.
Every day we're faced with an onslaught of illegal, offensive, and devastating actions by this administration. Um, these actions, they are intended to create chaos, hopelessness, and silence citizens. They call it, colleagues, flooding the lanes. And so they're throwing as much of everything they can up against the wall, and without protest, without response, without resistance, without education, without knowledge. Um, some of this stuff, is going to stick. One of the questions is, where do we go from here and what can we do now? And last week we saw citizens from all over the country flooding the field offices of their congressional representatives last week and
Right.
up through, what is today? Tomorrow is congressional recess week. And so we've seen, voters across the country flooding Republican offices and also Democratic offices, demanding that some of these actions be reversed.
Good morning, Vanita, first of all. But I understand that they're disbanding the database for the collection of law enforcement cops who have been convicted or accused of misconduct around the country. We were finally collecting that data, I think, in about the last 4, 5, 6 years, and they are disbanding that. That's no longer available. It's for what? For what reason, Marlon? Are they doing that?
Well, it's a danger, and and thinking about the conversation, all of us are probably familiar with this quote, but I think it's important for the audience to understand. Many years ago, one of the famous Supreme Court justices, Louis Brandeis, said this quote: "Our government is the potent, omnipresent teacher. For good or for ill, it teaches the whole people by example." And and so. And basically saying you invite anarchy if it's not following the law. Now, in terms of Doge, the problem is that you have statutes that have been enacted by the legislative branch, and there's been money appropriated by the legislative branch. The executive branch implements those existing laws. Under our system of government, the executive just can't say, for example, stop enforcing the Civil Rights Act. Excuse me. And that's some of the problems with Doge, that it's really not respecting our three branches of government and our constitutional structure.
And we have the Republicans sitting there just watching it happen, so they're not complicit, they're explicit in their support for this lawlessness on the part of the administration.
Well, speaking of Doge, here's why I'm troubled. The way that federal government works, folks, is that you have three branches of government. In our Constitution, the legislative branch are the Congress and the Senate, the House of Representatives and the Senate. They make budgets in which the president signs and make it become law. But the problem that I'm having with Doge, D-O-G-E, maybe just call it dog, is that it's not a cabinet level position. Their budget has never been approved by Congress. They start off with $6.75 million budget that Trump granted them at the inception, and now the budget is up to $14.4 million. So they're paying salaries to people for an entity that's never been authorized by Congress. I don't understand this. Maybe you could set light on this.
Well, the problem is not only that, is that you're giving people access to confidential information without going through a vetting process. For example, the other problem is that you have Elon Musk having access to information regarding his competitors. That's just like Ford being, in charge of the whole automotive industry, and they have secret information as relates to what GM or what Honda is doing. So it's just really unprecedented in terms of what they're doing. But I think, Nathaniel, you make a very good point that I think needs to be, amplified across the country, that we do not live in a monarchy. Our founders expressly rejected that and said that there are three branches of government. And so what Doge is doing, and you're absolutely right on point, is they're saying by executive order, I can unravel laws that have been passed by Congress. I can unravel appropriations that has been done by Congress, and that's just not appropriate. So we're just hopeful that the judiciary kind of steps in, that there's lawyers across the country that will, file lawsuits and that will educate our people across the country about this being inconsistent with our constitutional structure.
Well, it appears that the United States is moving from a democracy to an oligarchy, potentially, and just laying the foundation in terms of some of the outrageous comments that were made this week. And I'm sure we'll talk about the Ukrainian situation as well during this call. But I see us moving from a democracy to an oligarchy, right? And laying the foundation for oligarchies around the world. The president has already stated that, and this will really throw us into a constitutional crisis. He's already stated that in order to, quote, save our republic, he can violate court orders, which effectively place him above the law, right? And so we're in a very perilous times.
Well, he must be following the game plan of some of his favorite people like Putin and the gentleman in North Korea and other dictators around the world. So he
And we
sees
saw the image of him
some
this week.
success. Huh?
We saw the image of him this week on the cover of, I don't think it was the actual Time magazine, but it was a representation, an image of him this week with a crown on his head stating, you know, I am the king. He's serious. This is not a joke. And, you know, it was all laid out in Project 2025. They've been working on this for years, facilitated by the conservative think tank, the Heritage Foundation, and many of the authors of 2025. They've currently been appointed to key positions in the administration.
Right?
Well, it's not anyone's imagination that where the country is headed and what the goal is. You're right, it was in Project 2025. The other thing that's really important for people to understand is that many of those in the conservative movement have been, very forthright in saying that they are trying to mimic the behavior. And I want you all to remember this name, Viktor Orban. And he's a strong man in Hungary. They're following the same playbook in terms of deporting people, in terms of putting so many restrictions on what the universities can do. And in fact, the Conservative Political Action Committee, which basically is very prominent in the Republican Party, they had one of their annual meetings in Budapest, in Hungary. And they made it very well known that they want to duplicate the behavior of Viktor Orban. So, we all should be very, very concerned. It's not just our imagination, it's what the Republicans, many of them, are saying out loud.
Yep.
Well, one of my concerns is the fact that from now on, instead of Doe, our caller did something phenomenal. He got a correct name, Dog E. But the Dog E committee, formerly known as Doge, essentially fired the nuclear people who control the American nuclear arsenal. When they terminated them, they deleted their contact information. So the people that control the nuclear arsenal, they fired them. I mean, so these folks, what they're doing, I mean, they got rid of air traffic controllers with this buyout, not realizing that you can't become an air traffic controller like in 6 months. It's a 3-year process. So they have no idea. And then last night, the Joint Chief of Staff for the U.S. Armed Forces, General, he fired him last night.
4-star general, is that right?
Yes.
Nathaniel? Replaced by a 3-star general, definitely less qualified. But again, this is a Trump loyalist, a sycophant. Outrageous. Only the second African American to have achieved that.
Well, the other thing too.
Go ahead. Vanita, you were finishing, ma'am? Go ahead.
No, I said he was the only the second African American male to achieve the post of chair of the Joint Chief of Staff.
That is not a consideration you can make anymore, Vanita, the color of his skin or his race, because we're not going to be hiring people on that basis for anything anymore.
Well, we never have hired people on that basis for anything anymore, ever. But that is the myth that is being perpetuated as this administration has sought to eliminate diversity, equity, and inclusion, both at the government level and putting all kind of pressure on private enterprise as well. There is a judge that has currently, Milton, I don't know how long it's going to hold.
I'm being cynical. I wasn't being serious.
Oh, I know you are. I know you are. There is one judge who has put a temporary restraining order on those DEI executive orders that have been issued by the Trump administration. Again, I don't know how long those are going to hold.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm
and
gonna
one
take
of the
a
things I
couple
wanted to,
callers.
oh, go ahead.
Our chat thing is blowing up. We have like 100 different things, but we'll take one call. Caller, you have a quick question or comment for us today? Hello,
This
caller.
is Pierre.
Hey, Pierre. Thanks for your comments in the chat box. And now, what were you saying though? Hey, by the way, Pierre, what number did you dial today to get into our show? What number did you dial? What phone number?
I dialed 1-646-931-3860. Then when you get in, you got to put the second number in. And that number is 831-290-2258. And then you hit pound.
Thanks a million.
And then, yeah. I called in last week and just got to hit Milton's area real quick. And one of the things that I brought up was the fact that they had a suspect fire chief out there. And this gets into a lot of legal stuff. Well, this week, the Los Angeles mayor out there, Karen Bass, fired that fire chief. It caused all that was in charge. She undercut Mayor Karen Bass by not informing Mayor Bass of the severity of the fire. Not only that, he sent 1,000 firefighters home or whatever when they could have been out there pre-deployed. Now, you got a U.S. attorney there, you got a personal injury attorney there, you got a defense attorney, you got Vanita there who works in corporate. To me, I want to know when that LA fire chief is going to be investigated and when she's going to be charged, because that dereliction of duty caused hundreds of millions of dollars. It was deliberate, in my opinion, hundreds of millions of dollars of fire damage. And not only that, people were killed, people died. And I wanted to get you guys' opinions on that because, and one other thing, there's couple of our governors are starting to emerge as leaders. You got J.D. Pritzker and Kathy Hochul. And, I'm looking at those two because they may end up leading the party into a fight. But since there's so much stuff going on, I wanted Milton to address that point and what's going on out there in his city.
Just briefly, if I may, Nate, in addressing Pierre, I don't know if the investigation is complete, Pierre, as to what knowledge was known, absolutely known, and what was not, and whether or not, as a conversation I had at dinner last night with a young lady whom I highly respect, that it's really odd that the first female gay fire chief is sort of the scapegoat a lot of people are believing for whatever purpose she was fired, but it's not because she could have prevented the fire, number one, or number two, or because there was a late warning to certain citizens in Altadena. It's just right now still in the state of investigation, Pierre, and I'm not willing to take sides with anyone at this stage.
Well, I think it'd be justified in taking sides with Mayor Karen Bass because, well, the LA Times has laid it out in a piece, but not only that, the mayor just simply came out and said she fired him because the woman, the fire chief, kept her in the dark. Oh. And you could have had, Milton, you could have had 10 trucks out there pre-deployed in those areas That's the truth. I mean, they deviated from what they normally do out there when you've got fires like that. A lot of people, she deviated from what they normally do.
I got
It's like, yeah, that's a dereliction of duty that I think the feds would even be looking at. She needs to go to jail, that lady. That fire chief.
Well,
I know there's going to be a lengthy investigation, like Milton said. You know, initially they jumped on Mayor Bass, right? Oh, she was over in another country, blah, blah, blah. And Pierre and Milton, I'll say this, the fire chief, right, that she fired initially came out before a complete investigation and stated that the fire department was, quote, woefully underfunded. And we're finding out that that's not true. You know, so she jumped out there with information earlier that was used to demonize Mayor Bass, Pierre. I'm sure you recall that,
Yeah.
you know, and now, and I read the story this week about Mayor Bass, of course, firing her after all this information now is coming up. One, that she didn't inform Mayor Bass regarding the weather situation. And I understand that there were, was it at least 1,000 firefighters who were sent home that could have been deployed to help, you know, fight the fire as well. But as Milton said, there's going to be, you know, a lot we have to wait to see what a full and complete investigation.
Okay, wait a
uncovers.
second. Hold it. Here's something. Okay, that's a local issue. Here's a bigger issue here. Folks, you haven't even talked about one of the most critical issues. There have been 5 plane crashes in 4 weeks. 5. We have a president come in and fire the chief of air traffic control. And is that not a concern that we have all these plane crashes? We went, what, 20 years and all of a sudden we've had 5 in 4 weeks?
Well,
Nate,
it's really
there's just
Imhotep sent that text to him, and I think he's right. He said that they're being replaced, and, you know, is it safe to fly?
You know, I've flown twice to the East Coast in January, and it is a concerning matter when you get on a plane today. Go ahead, Marlon. You were going to say something because
No, you go ahead. Go ahead. No.
No. That I haven't finished my thought.
Yeah, no. What I was saying is that, you know, people have to, you know, understand that we don't want to repeat the mistakes of the past. And I know it's easy to get frustrated at government, but we have to understand that a lot of these agencies and a lot of these regulations came into play because a lot of people died and got hurt. There's a reason why the FAA Federal Aviation Administration was founded. There's a reason why there's Food and Drug Administration and various rules before, you know, medication can be sold, you know, over the counter. And so, you know, we don't want to get in a situation where we repeat our past mistakes. The other thing that we need to be really cognizant of is that there's going to be a lot of budget cutting for these regulatory agencies, and they're going to try to, you know, send these back to the states and provide less money. So it is a danger across the board, not only in as relates to aviation, but in consumer safety, and making sure that you have the proper medications, proper oversight is all something that we should be concerned about and be vocal about.
And I've never seen a time in the history of our country where disaster funds are threatening to be withheld based on political agenda. It's outrageous.
It's outrageous that the Alzheimer research, they say, is going to be set back 20 years because of cancellation of funds for or something.
Another governor, back to the point about governors standing up, was this week we saw that exchange between the president and Maine Governor Janet Mills, and she told him right to his face, "We'll see you in court." That she plans to follow the laws and he threatened to withhold funds to the state of Maine if she didn't enforce his rule regarding trans women participating in women's sports.
I don't know about y'all, but seeing you in court, I've tried probably somewhere between 250, 300 cases over my career. It takes time to resolve a matter in court. I don't know if the people have the time to wait for the court resolution of some of these problems that they're faced with now.
I have a question for you in terms of some of these initial cases that were filed. The unions, for example, filed cases on behalf of their union members after, many of them have been fired. My question is, and those cases were dismissed on the basis of no standing. And as you know, courts don't entertain hypothetical questions. There has to be an actual case in controversy. And there has to be a demonstrated, injury shown, in the complaint. So my question is, how are we filing cases where, there's no standing? And, the courts are being, forced to, dismiss those cases.
That's what I'm saying, Vanita. These people out here living from day to day and working and taking care of their families. You can't wait for a court decision if your baby needs milk.
Okay. Now we'll go back to the line. Second caller, you had a quick question, a comment, 347. Go ahead.
Hi. Thank you guys for having the show again today. It's really fascinating to hear you guys. And I'm calling because I just wanted to follow up on last week's conversation last Saturday. From what I could gather, the mayoral election is going to still be a 3-tier election. So there's that. But then I also sent you in the chat the list of people who are going to actually have their hands in the ring for the election, who are the top tier people, but there's a bunch more. So all I can say is that Mayor Adams is probably not going to get reelected. If he runs as a Republican, he might win that side, and so he'll stay in the election, but he's not going to win. So there's that. But back to all the stuff that Elon and his Elonics and all of them are doing, a lot of it is that they really want to frighten us, and it doesn't really have teeth. And what I mean by that is Elon is not an elected official. So if we really wanted to get at Trumpster, what we need to do is go after his Achilles heel, who is Elon. He's a private citizen. So if we do if we file state lawsuits against Elon, and we win as the people of the United States, Elon will definitely be, he could be arrested if he doesn't comply by state law enforcement. We don't have to rely on the feds or the DOJ or the FBI or anybody else to pick him up, the U.S. Marshals. We can rely on state law enforcement people to pick him up. So there's that. So I just wanted to point that out. I'm not giving up the faith of America. Has been through a lot. It's the only country I know as an African American, and I'm sure many of you could feel the same way. We don't have another country to go back to. White people might. They got Europe. If they have to flee and go somewhere else, they got someplace else to go. I don't have connection to my African roots or any of my other heritage roots across this world. So I'm here because this is my country. My people helped to build this, built this and fought to keep this. And so I'm not going anywhere. I might decide to leave with my triplets for a short period of time, just so that they are not hurt. But I'm not giving up my American citizenship, and that's just the bottom line. Anyway, I'll go ahead and listen.
One quick thing that I want you to address, though, real quickly, because we talked about the West Coast and East Coast. There's a big controversy about your mayor. Very briefly, in about 30 seconds, what's the issue there in New York City, and why are people so upset about this?
Well, people are upset about it because Mayor Adams is in fight or flight. He basically he has no choice. He's either going to go to jail or he's going to stand up for New York City constituents, and he is not willing to give that his freedom up for New York City constituents. So what he's talking about allowing the federal government to do is to vacate all the laws in the cities that we voted for. For instance, ICE can't just come in and pick up just regular people without a warrant. Things like he can't determine, federal government can't determine how much SNAP people in New York City get, food and assistance. That federal government cannot determine what our traffic laws are. And as you know, he just decided that Hochul's idea of trying to slow traffic, that he wiped that away, supposedly. And this is the other thing. I don't know how much teeth is behind all of the stuff that he says he's doing. I'm not sure if it's actually happening. You see what I'm saying? I have to hear from people this is actually happening, not just that he says he's going to do it. So that's the beef with the mayor. And most people didn't like him anyway. I told you that 3-tier thing threw a lot of people off. He probably wouldn't have gotten elected if we didn't have a 3-tier voting system at that time.
Renee, I have a question for you. I just heard yesterday that the mayor has sued the Trump administration for actually taking money out of a bank account where, what is it, $40 million had been deposited into a bank account for immigration, something with respect to immigration. It was actually taken out of the bank account. Can you share some light on that issue?
Well, I didn't hear that the mayor sued. I think it's the city of New York City that sued the constituents, because the mayor is not going to do anything against the federal government because he needs a pardon. So it was either New York. Mm-hmm. Yes, ma'am.
They put his name on it, and again, that's why we have to research because, he is the face of New York City, right? As the mayor.
Correct.
So but I hear you.
Correct. So what Hochul did in the meantime, she's appointed people to step in for New York City that can, I don't know if you heard this, she's not going to fire him. And after hearing a lot of arguments about it and doing some research, New York City is better off if the governor does not fire the mayor. And the reason why we're better off is because he can take this to the litigation all the way up to the Supreme Court, which would take forever. So, and it would be quicker to just have an election in May or November, a primary in May and an election in November, than it would for her to fire him and have it go through litigation. So what she did in the meantime is she put in some safety guards. She's appointed a commission that will oversee what the mayor does. And basically this commission or these people that she appointed are supposed to protect the people of New York City, the constituents, to make sure there are no things going forward that's going to hurt the New York City residents. So I'm not sure if that lawsuit came out of that. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm just going to say, where I understand it, she doesn't agree with his quid pro quo with Trump agreement, but she doesn't have the authority to fire him, right? She doesn't have the authority to fire him. Is that what her situation is?
No, she can fire him. I mean, she can do it. But that leaves her in a precarious position because she would fire him, judge him. I mean, she would be all of it. And what he could do is take her to court. And so that would become a problem.
Okay.
Also, Denise, I was reading the article, just for the record, the city controller, Brad Landers, pressured the Adams administration to file a lawsuit because he almost refused to do it, according to this news article. And because Doggy, as one of our callers called now, Dog into the Doge, they had stole $80 million out of the city's coffers, and they were suing them to get the $80 million back. And so it resulted in the city legal department suing the Trump administration to get the $80 million back into their bank account. They took the money out of their account. And
that's it. That's correct.
Yeah.
That's it.
Okay. Now let's get out third caller at 408. You got a quick question coming for us, caller today. Go ahead.
All right. Bar again, there, good brother Nate and everybody. Attorney Grimes Banks. Sorry, the attorney getting the name. Sorry, I don't have it right there, but I will remember you. I know I've seen it. A couple of things I wanted to point out that I think was very important this week too. Some other incidents, Milton. I'm sure you probably know that Trump eliminated the federal database that former President Joe Biden had established that tracked police officers and when they were had a disproportionate treatment or had sentences or either something adjudicated against them, they were put in that database. He eliminated that. Also, he nominated so-called, that whole Black History Month thing was just ridiculous, but I'm not going to go there right now. It just was disturbing to me, period, in the face of everything he's tearing down. He gutted the Civil Rights Department. He's threatening schools and colleges, threatening HBCUs. I went to Lincoln University for a year and a half. I love Lincoln, Jeff City. He threatened HBCUs. If you teach Black history, we're going to take funding. It's just gone. But he nominated this woman supposedly to be the pardon czar. I know you all saw that. I just looked at the article. I can't remember her name, but he said he's going to make her the pardon czar. I don't know if that's superficial or whatever the case may be. But let's deal with that for a minute. Pardons. Joe Biden went through over his whole term. He pardoned a lot of people, especially a lot of Black people. Now, this man pardoned all of January 6th. Enrico Tarrio just got arrested again in D.C. again yesterday for throwing the folks' phones and threatening people. He just got arrested again. Okay, so are you really serious about pardoning low-level or nonviolent Black people? Because last time he was in, out of 200, and I think he had the least amount of pardons for a 4-year president. I think he had 216, and out of those 216, I think only 16 of them were Black. So he had a very, very poor record then. But this performative behavior, removing the database to track police, and then talking about this pardon czar, I think it just slaps in the face of really the legalities and the things that Black people go through. We just saw police in Lawrence, Indiana, get suspended. Lawrence has a Black female mayor. She was right on top of it. Attorney Banks, they released the body cam footage the very next day, unedited. I haven't seen that done by a police department or leadership ever. They released it unedited the very next day to get out in front of it. Suspended 2 police, jumped on a gentleman, parked in a fire lane in front of Walmart. Shouldn't even escalate. It's like they don't even understand de-escalation techniques. It just was pitiful. But I want to ask you, Attorney Banks, now in with this. The settlement from Sonia Massey, the $10 million settlement that came out this week, is the officer still charged there? Is he still facing a trial and charges? Because that's the question we couldn't get answers to. And thank you all for taking my call.
Yes, and thank you for those great points. Yes, there was a $10 million settlement. To my understanding, the charges are still pending against that officer. He was asking to be released from jail pending his trial because of a health situation, and I need to determine what the status is on that request. Thank you, caller.
Very, very sad incident. You know, we have all these turmoil, and caller made an excellent point that affect a lot of different, particularly African American. If you erase the database of corrupt or law enforcement officials who engage in police misconduct, as citizens, what protections do we have? So in other words, you got to get rid of the bad apples. Majority of police officers out there every day are doing a great job for the citizen. They're protecting us, and they're doing a good job. But then there are some that are just bad. And so our objective must be to get rid of the bad officers in order to protect the system. And so when you have a president intervene and says that that's not important, I think it is important, because all the cases that I've done, one of the things that becoming more relevant now is that in the city of Indianapolis, for example, everyone, they continue to hide evidence. So most of the time when there's a police officer action shooting, the city will not release the evidence for a year until a year later. And in some cases, they materially alter the evidence. Like in a recent case that I'm doing now, the young man who was shot in a tree, they came out and destroyed all the evidence after they murdered the guy. And so this police database, I can't stress to you folks how important that is, because you want to be able to access information of these unlawful acts. The average citizen, for example, if you get charged with a crime, there's a permanent record. So even now, when you have the record of sponge, a lot of time I look at the database, I still could see the charges in the computer system, even after the expungement is done. So I think that's a big mistake, and that's a miscarriage of justice to get rid of a database, because we need that, folks. Trust me.
Yeah, not only that, Nathaniel, that's also important regarding that database. We've had, many notorious cases around the country where it turns out that the police officer had prior misconduct. And sometimes it's at a prior police department and they get hired again by this new police department. And so it's really important to make sure that there's proper protections for the public to have that history available.
Hey, one final comment, because we're about out of time. We started off talking about these federal workers. One question to the panel. I mean, what the heck can they do? These people who had outstanding careers in providing service to each of us as citizens, whether it's Social Security Administration, whether it's the air traffic controller, what legal recourse do they have? What do you think?
Well, I mean, they're going to have to, and that's kind of part of the problem we've been talking about. There's an administrative structure, the Merit System Protections Board, there's grievances, and this could take a while to get through that process. In the meantime, as Milton properly pointed out, I mean, there's bills that have to be paid. The other recourse is to try to get unemployment benefits and then food stamp SNAP benefits. My advice to all those that I interact with is that, hey, you paid for those benefits through your good work. So don't be ashamed in terms of getting unemployment, SNAP benefits, whatever you need to, maintain your family. But also just seek appropriate legal advice to see, if you have any legal recourses as well.
Any thoughts about that, Vanita or Milton?
Just
Well, I
briefly,
think that
go ahead, Vanita.
you go ahead, Milton, please.
No, please.
I was going to say that we really need to look at what those protections are, Marlon, for employees, for government employees. And maybe next week we can specifically talk about, the administrative, process. I know that there are less protections for employees that were still on probation, but through the merit system administrative process, perhaps we can provide more information about that. And then also, there are groups around the country that are assisting government employees through this time and assisting them, with their litigation efforts. But again, litigation does take time.
Litigation takes time. Protests can be immediately. Nonviolent protests, I recommend, but don't sit back and just let it happen to your people, please. Protests.
There are
Demand.
protests across the country against Tesla at dealerships where Teslas are sold. There's at least one here today in my local community. And you're absolutely right, Milton. And there's a big, quote, boycott coming up on February 28th
Yes.
as well.
Yeah, dump your Tesla stock. A long time ago, I had Tesla stocks in my portfolio. I sold them and donated my profit to nonprofits that help with Tesla. And if you have a car, get rid of it.
I was listening to a Dr. King speech this week on the radio, on the car radio, and he was saying we got to stop spending money at this place, this place, and this place, and this place. That was 60 years ago, y'all, and we're still faced with the same situation. We got to stop spending money with these corporations that are supporting President Trump.
Well, folks, we're at the end of our show again. We got to continue this discussion next week. We had so many topics today, but we're going to pick up again with Renee. We got to follow up on this New York situation. That's unprecedented, I think, in American history, what's going on in New York City with the mayor there. It's a fascinating legal story and also one that carries a lot of significant consequence. So join us next Saturday, folks. We'll bring you up to date of legal issues of the day. So thank you, everyone. Have